In the quiet suburb of Oakridge, where manicured lawns and picket fences created an illusion of perfection, a storm was brewing beneath the surface. At the center of this tempest were three individuals whose lives would become inextricably linked in a tale of love, obsession, and revenge. Sarah Thompson, a 38-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative, had once been the picture of suburban success. With her sleek blonde bob and designer wardrobe, she exuded confidence and charm. But beneath her polished exterior, a maelstrom of emotions threatened to break free. Michael Anderson, Sarah's ex-husband, was a 40-year-old software engineer. His boyish good looks and easygoing nature had once been the perfect complement to Sarah's ambition. Now, those same qualities drew him to a new chapter in his life, one that Sarah couldn't bear to accept. Emily Chen, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher, had entered Michael's life like a breath of fresh air. Her warm smile and genuine kindness had captured Michael's heart, offering him a chance at happiness he thought he'd lost. The story of Sarah and Michael's marriage was one of initial passion that had cooled over time. They had met in college, Sarah immediately drawn to Michael's intelligence and quiet confidence. For Michael, Sarah's drive and vivacity were irresistible. They married young, just a year after graduation, with dreams of building a perfect life together. For a while, it seemed they had achieved that dream. Sarah's career in pharmaceutical sales took off, her ambition and networking skills propelling her up the corporate ladder. Michael's steady work as a software engineer provided stability, and his calm demeanor balanced Sarah's more volatile nature. But as the years passed, cracks began to appear in their relationship. Sarah's focus on her career left little time for nurturing their marriage. Michael, who had once admired Sarah's ambition, began to feel neglected and unappreciated. Their conversations became shorter, their shared moments fewer. The breaking point came 5 years ago, when Sarah discovered she was unable to have children. The news devastated her, challenging her notion of the perfect life she had envisioned. Michael tried to be supportive, suggesting adoption or other alternatives, but Sarah withdrew into herself, throwing herself even more into her work. It was Michael who finally suggested divorce, his voice quiet but firm as he told Sarah, "I can't live like this anymore. We're not partners. We're not even friends. I think it's time we admit this isn't working." Sarah, caught off guard by Michael's decision, reacted with anger and disbelief. She accused him of abandoning her when she needed him most, unable to see how her own behavior had contributed to the breakdown of their marriage. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago, leaving Sarah feeling betrayed and Michael relieved but guilty. They sold their shared home, divided their assets, and went their separate ways. Michael moved into a modest apartment, while Sarah used her portion of the proceeds to buy a sleek condo in a trendy part of town. For a while, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah focused on her career, climbing even higher in her company's ranks. Michael took time to rediscover himself, joining a local hiking club and reconnecting with old friends. It was at one of these hiking excursions that Michael met Emily. Emily Chen was everything Sarah wasn't: gentle, nurturing, and content with life's simple pleasures. Her long, dark hair and warm brown eyes immediately caught Michael's attention, but it was her kindness and genuine interest in others that truly drew him in. Their relationship developed slowly, neither wanting to rush into anything serious. But as months passed, it became clear to both Michael and Emily that they had found something special. Michael found himself smiling more, laughing easily in a way he hadn't in years. Emily, who had always been cautious in relationships, felt safe and valued in Michael's company. It was a chance encounter at a local cafe that brought Sarah face to face with this new reality. She had just finished a meeting with a client when she saw them, Michael and Emily, sitting at a corner table, their heads bent close together, laughing over something on Emily's phone. The sight hit Sarah like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and shaken. In that moment, something shifted within Sarah. The pain of her divorce, which she had pushed down and ignored for years, came rushing back with a vengeance. But now, it was tinged with something darker, a burning jealousy and a desperate need to reclaim what she saw as rightfully hers. As she watched Michael reach across the table to take Emily's hand, Sarah's mind began to race. She couldn't accept that Michael had moved on, that he had found happiness without her. In her twisted logic, Emily had stolen what belonged to Sarah, and she would have to pay. Little did Emily and Michael know, as they enjoyed their coffee date, that their lives were about to become entangled in a web of obsession and revenge, orchestrated by a woman who couldn't let go of the past. Sarah's obsession with Michael and Emily's relationship grew rapidly in the weeks following her chance encounter at the cafe. She found herself consumed by thoughts of them, imagining their life together and seething with jealousy. Her work began to suffer as she spent hours scrolling through their social media profiles, analyzing every photo and interaction. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Sarah made a decision that would set her on a dangerous path. She told herself, "I need to know more. I need to understand why he chose her over me." With trembling hands, she created a fake social media account using a stock photo of a nondescript woman as her profile picture. Sarah's plan was simple. She would friend request Emily and Michael, posing as a new neighbor in their area. To her surprise and delight, Emily accepted the request almost immediately. Michael was more cautious, but after seeing that Emily had accepted, he too allowed this new neighbor into their online world. Through this false persona, Sarah gained intimate access to Michael and Emily's lives. She learned about their date nights, their weekend plans, even the names of Emily's students, whom she spoke about with such affection. Each new piece of information felt like a knife twisting in Sarah's heart, fueling her resentment and strengthening her resolve to reclaim what she saw as rightfully hers. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. She began driving by Michael's apartment at odd hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of him or Emily. She would park across the street, sinking low in her seat, her heart racing every time she saw movement behind the curtains. One night, emboldened by several glasses of wine, Sarah decided to get closer. She crept up to Michael's ground floor apartment, peering through a gap in the blinds. Michael and Emily curled up on the couch, his arm around her shoulders as they watched a movie. Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms as she fought the urge to scream. Sarah's colleagues at work began to notice changes in her behavior. Once impeccably put together, she now often arrived at the office with dark circles under her eyes, her usual designer outfits replaced by wrinkled blouses and mismatched shoes. Her sales numbers, once consistently at the top of the department, began to slip. Her boss, concerned about her performance, called Sarah into his office one afternoon. He told her gently, "Sarah, I'm worried about you. Your work has been suffering lately. Is everything all right?" Sarah, caught off guard by the question, struggled to maintain her composure. She mumbled something about stress and lack of sleep, promising to do better. But as she left the office that day, Sarah's mind was not on work. Instead, she was formulating a plan. If she couldn't have Michael, she would make sure Emily couldn't either. The thought sent a thrill of excitement through her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Sarah's plan began to take shape over the next few weeks. She started by gathering information: Emily's work schedule, her routines, the places she frequented. Through careful manipulation of her fake social media account, Sarah learned that Emily had a severe nut allergy. This piece of information sparked a dark idea in Sarah's mind. Meanwhile, oblivious to the danger brewing, Michael and Emily's relationship continued to flourish. They had recently started discussing the possibility of moving in together, a step that both excited and slightly terrified them. One evening, as they sat on Michael's balcony, enjoying the warm summer air, Emily turned to Michael with a soft smile. She told him, "You know, I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who makes me feel so safe and loved." Michael, touched by her words, pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I feel the same way," he replied. his voice thick with emotion. "You've brought so much joy into my life, Emily." As Michael and Emily dreamed of their future together, Sarah was meticulously planning to destroy it all. She began purchasing supplies, latex gloves, a wig, non-prescription glasses to alter her appearance. She also bought a variety of nut-based products, storing them in a locked box in her bedroom. Sarah's obsession had now completely taken over her life. She neglected her work, her friends, even her own health, in pursuit of her twisted goal. Her once immaculate condo became cluttered and unkempt, mirroring the chaos in her mind. One night, as Sarah sat in her darkened living room, surrounded by photos of Michael and Emily she had printed from social media, she made her final decision. She whispered to herself, "It's time. I'll make them pay for what they've done to me." With trembling hands, she began to write out the details of her plan, a sinister smile playing on her lips as she imagined her ultimate revenge. As Sarah's plan crystallized, she became increasingly reckless in her pursuit of information. She began following Emily more closely, tracking her movements and routines with an almost clinical precision. One afternoon, Sarah followed Emily to her favorite coffee shop, watching from her car as the unsuspecting teacher ordered her usual latte. Seizing the opportunity, Sarah approached the counter after Emily left, engaging the barista in casual conversation. With practiced charm, she asked, "That woman who just left, is she a regular here? She looks so familiar." The friendly barista, not suspecting any malice, happily shared that Emily came in most afternoons after school, always ordering the same drink. This information became a crucial part of Sarah's plan. She now knew exactly when and where Emily would be vulnerable. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily's relationship continued to deepen. They had finally decided to take the plunge and move in together. One weekend, as they packed up Emily's apartment, Michael paused, holding a framed photo of them from their first vacation together. He looked at Emily and said, "I can't believe how lucky I am to have found you. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible." Emily, touched by his words, crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. "I feel the same way," she replied softly. "You're everything I've ever wanted in a partner." As Michael and Emily celebrated this new chapter in their lives, Sarah's mental state continued to deteriorate. Her work performance had plummeted to the point where her boss had no choice but to place her on probation. But Sarah barely registered this professional setback, so consumed was she by her obsession. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the haggard woman staring back at her. Her once sleek bob was limp and unkempt, dark roots showing at her scalp. Her eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep, held a manic gleam. She whispered to her reflection, "They think they can just erase me? Replace me? I'll show them. I'll make them remember me forever." The next day, Sarah put her plan into motion. She donned her disguise, a dark wig, glasses, and nondescript clothing, and made her way to Emily's favorite coffee shop. She arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. As the afternoon crowd began to filter in, Sarah's heart raced. She kept her eyes fixed on the door, her hand clutching her purse, where she had hidden a small container filled with finely ground nut powder. At precisely 3:45 p.m., Emily walked in, her face bright as she greeted the barista. Sarah watched, her breathing shallow, as Emily ordered her usual drink and then stepped aside to wait. With practiced nonchalance, Sarah approached the counter, positioning herself next to where Emily's drink would be placed. As the barista turned to prepare another order, Sarah saw her chance. In one swift motion, she opened the lid of Emily's cup and sprinkled the nut powder inside, stirring quickly with a stirrer she had palmed earlier. Just as Sarah replaced the lid, Emily turned back to collect her drink. For a heart-stopping moment, their eyes met. Sarah froze, certain she had been caught. But Emily merely smiled politely and reached for her latte, completely unaware of the danger lurking within. Sarah hurried out of the coffee shop, her heart pounding in her ears. She made it to her car, hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. A mix of exhilaration and terror coursed through her veins as she watched Emily exit the shop, latte in hand, and walk towards her car. As Emily drove away, Sarah followed at a discreet distance, her mind racing with anticipation. She had done it. Soon, Michael would know the pain of loss that she had experienced. Soon, he would understand the depth of her love and the consequences of rejecting her. What Sarah didn't know, however, was that fate had other plans. As she tailed Emily's car, lost in her twisted fantasies of revenge, she failed to notice the traffic light turning red at an upcoming intersection. Emily, always cautious, began to slow down, but Sarah, distracted and agitated, didn't register the change. She plowed through the intersection just as a large delivery truck entered from the cross street. The impact was devastating. Sarah's car spun violently, metal crunching and glass shattering. As her world turned upside down, Sarah's last conscious thought was of Michael's face, not filled with grief as she had imagined, but with relief and love as he looked at Emily. Then everything went black. The screeching of tires and the sickening crunch of metal brought traffic to a standstill at the busy intersection. Emily, who had just passed through on a green light, watched in horror through her rearview mirror as the accident unfolded behind her. Instinctively, she pulled over, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. As sirens wailed in the distance, Emily cautiously approached the wreckage, her untouched latte forgotten on the passenger seat of her car. The delivery truck driver, visibly shaken but unharmed, was already out of his vehicle, staring in shock at the crumpled car that had run the red light. Emily gasped as she drew closer to the mangled vehicle. Through the shattered window, she could make out a familiar face beneath a askew, dark wig. "Sarah?" she whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. Even in her battered state, there was no mistaking Michael's ex-wife. Within minutes, the intersection was a flurry of activity as police and paramedics arrived on the scene. Sarah was carefully extracted from the wreckage, unconscious and critically injured. As she was rushed to the hospital, detectives began questioning witnesses, piecing together the events that led to the accident. Emily, still in shock, gave her statement to the police. She mentioned seeing Sarah at the coffee shop earlier, though she hadn't recognized her at the time due to the disguise. This information piqued the detectives' interest, prompting them to dig deeper into Sarah's recent activities. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors worked feverishly to save Sarah's life. Michael, notified of the accident, rushed to the emergency room, his mind reeling with questions. When he arrived, he found Emily waiting, her face pale and drawn. "What happened?" Michael asked, his voice tight with concern. Emily recounted the events of the afternoon, her voice trembling as she described the accident and her shocking realization about Sarah's identity. As they waited for news on Sarah's condition, detectives arrived to question Michael about his ex-wife. Their probing questions began to paint a disturbing picture of Sarah's recent behavior. Michael, horrified, learned of Sarah's obsession, her stalking, and the fake social media account she had created to spy on them. Hours passed in a tense blur of police interviews and anxious waiting. Finally, a tired-looking doctor emerged from the operating room. "Mr. Anderson?" he called, and Michael stood, gripping Emily's hand tightly. The doctor's news was grim. While they had managed to stabilize Sarah, she had suffered severe brain damage. "She's in a coma," the doctor explained gently. "At this point, we can't be certain if she'll ever regain consciousness." As Michael struggled to process this information, one of the detectives approached, his face serious. "Mr. Anderson, Miss Chen, we need to discuss something with you," he said, leading them to a quiet corner. What the detective revealed next left both Michael and Emily reeling. During the investigation of Sarah's apartment, they had discovered her detailed plans for revenge, including her intention to poison Emily with nut powder. "If not for the accident," the detective explained solemnly, "Miss Chen's life would have been in serious danger." Emily felt her knees weaken, and she sank into a nearby chair, the full weight of her near miss hitting her. Michael, his face a mask of shock and guilt, struggled to reconcile the Sarah he had once loved with the disturbed woman who had planned such a heinous act. In the days that followed, the story of Sarah's obsession and thwarted revenge plot became public knowledge, sending shockwaves through their quiet suburban community. Michael and Emily found themselves at the center of a media storm, their privacy invaded as reporters clamored for interviews and neighbors gossiped behind closed doors. Sarah remained in a coma, her future uncertain. The doctors were pessimistic about her chances of recovery, leaving Michael to grapple with complex feelings of guilt, anger, and grief for the woman he had once loved. As the media frenzy began to die down, Michael and Emily were left to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of Sarah's actions. The experience had shaken them both deeply, testing the strength of their relationship. One evening, as they sat in their living room, the weight of recent events hanging heavily between them, Emily turned to Michael. I keep thinking, she said softly, about how differently things could have turned out. How close I came to... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Michael took her hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and residual fear. I can't imagine losing you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. What Sarah did, what she planned to do, I'll never forgive myself for not seeing how troubled she was. Emily squeezed his hand reassuringly. This wasn't your fault, Michael. Sarah made her own choices. We can't let her actions define our future. As they held each other, both Michael and Emily knew that the road ahead would not be easy. They would need to work through the trauma of what had happened to rebuild their sense of safety and trust, but they were determined to face it together, their love strengthened by the ordeal they had endured. In the quiet of their home, as the sun set on another day, Michael and Emily made a silent promise to each other. They would not let fear or the specter of Sarah's actions overshadow their happiness. They would move forward, cherishing each moment and the love they shared, always aware of how precious and fragile life could be. And so, as Sarah lay unconscious in her hospital bed, a living reminder of the destructive power of obsession and revenge, Michael and Emily began the process of healing. Their story, which had captivated and horrified their community, would serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dark places that jealousy and unresolved pain can lead, and the strength required to choose love and forgiveness in the face of unthinkable betrayal.